Hi, this is Stephen Mead, lifelong entrepreneur, business owner, and global speaker. Over the years, I've read hundreds of books and spent thousands of hours developing what I call the bullseye belief system. And I've used that system to develop my own companies, as well as help others learn to be specific, targeted, and focused to get exactly what they want in life. Again, I'm Stephen Mead, and this is the Bullseye Guy Podcast. Stephen Mead again, back again with the Bullseye Guy Podcast from the lovely Groove radio station, the studios in downtown Los Angeles. And we're going to talk a little blockchain again, probably some blockchain, probably some food. We have John Sutton here. John also has a podcast called The Truth in Food.
Yes, I do.
Out of Groove Radio also, doing a great job. Travels around the world. Some of our stories I'm sure will come up with John and I as we talk today, but I call him the travel savant. We have been in crazy corners around the world, and he has tips and tricks and has got us out of many scary situations, fun situations. And then one time I didn't listen to him in Milan, and I'm the worst off for it. So I apologize for that in advance.
You've made that up many times over. No problem.
Yeah, but John, again, global expert in food. We're going to try and find a little bit of a way to cross it over into the world of blockchain, which is what I'm a lot more focused on. And again, the way I describe blockchain, I call it a lot of baffle, and I'll credit you with that. The story was we were standing on the streets in Davos, Switzerland.
Yeah.
World Economic Forum. Bunch of random people running around talking blockchain. And what I learned about events is there's a difference between being at an event and being in the event. John and I were at Davos. We were on the main street.
That's right.
We were hanging out. We were in the Russia house, the Ukraine house. We were in some fun stuff, but we weren't in the actual event inside the security zone. We're still working on that one.
Yes.
But do you remember what happened? We're standing outside, a bunch of people are talking, and you off the cuff came up with the phrase
blockchain babble.
A lot of blockchain babble.
And baffle.
And baffle. Yeah, and that's what we've kind of learned. That was over a year ago, and really a lot of progress and momentum within the space and the technology. And I want to do a little level set for anybody that doesn't know. Blockchain, crypto are invariably different. Crypto to me is like glorified penny stocks. Blockchain is much more like a technology. If you think about the internet itself is not an industry. The internet's a technology that basically benefits a lot of industries. So everything from websites to databases to cell phones to debit cards basically all run on the internet. And blockchain's going to impact a lot of that. And one of the areas it's going to impact as well as food. And before we start over into that, I'm going to turn this over to John for a little bit, because John I've known for many years, and he's a bit of an enigma. Travels around the world, and you ask people, well, what does John Sutton do? And it's been tough for people to understand him, I think. You know, when I first met him, we actually called him Vatican John because of a lot of work he did with the Vatican and entertainment. But now we've repositioned him. He's technically the food archaeologist, which I think is a good description. So under the guise and premise of the food archaeologist, John, why don't you introduce yourself and what would you tell people you actually do?
You know, I'm a food and beverage global expert. I would say my training in Switzerland in economics really showed me that there's scarce resources around the world and how to allocate those to the consumer. There is so much misinformation out there from a corporate standpoint, from what the governments are telling you. And so I pride myself on working with governments, traveling all over the world into Siberia, Tunisia, Sri Lanka, Africa, Mexico, China, looking for those foods that can be brought to the United States and brought around the world that are economical, that are good for the environment and tasty. So for me, it's really about eat, drink, and think at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating because you went down that list, and I've been in a few of those countries with you, and several you haven't mentioned, but you didn't mention Russia. Was there a reason you didn't mention it?
Well, I said Siberia.
Close enough.
Russia, I've been working there since 1991.
Yeah.
I have gone to Russia every single year since 1991. So my actual my thesis of my economics degree was the integration between a central planned economy and a capitalist economy. And I interned for GATT, which was the Guaranteed Agreement on Tariff and Trade, which became the World Trade Organization. So early on, understanding the economies of food and countries, that's why I went to Russia in the early 90s and essentially went all over the country looking for companies that were just emerging from a central planned economy into shares and into offering private sector investment and doing all of this. And what's amazing now is I'm seeing the United States turn more into what Russia used to be, and Russia turn more into what the United States used to be.
Yeah, and part of the reason I wanted to go back there is Russia's this big anomaly now. It's a bit of a boogeyman in the politics, and it probably should or shouldn't be. But you've really been in these international circles for a really long time, and it brings about the perspective not only with Russia, and we'll go back and talk to a couple of the food products there, including one I can never remember. Every girl in Russia knows whatever this thing is you bring back. I can never remember the name.
Oblatikha.
There you go. Which every time I talk about it, I joke. We'll joke about it now. I say, oh, my friend Johnny brings pine nuts in, and he brings this berry out, and I can never remember the name.
Sea buckthorn in English.
Sea buckthorn. But in Russian, it's called
Oblatikha.
And what does it do? Because everybody that knows about it absolutely loves it.
So it's a berry that is basically from the north, from the northern regions, which has long summers and maybe a 3-month short summer cycle. So during those 3 months, intense UV light comes in from the sun, and all of this plant's energy comes bursting out in these orange berries called sea buckthorn. It has the highest concentration of natural vitamin C, not a chemical vitamin C. There are antioxidants in this that literally go into your system and scrub away so many of the diseases and the internal malfunctions of your system. And what it does tremendously as well is in Russia, people smash it up, drink it in water. They use it for teas, and then they also use it on your skin. So in the United States, you mostly see it on very expensive cosmetics, but naturally what it does for your skin and makes your skin, which is an organ, it's like your heart, like your liver, it is an organ. It protects your skin from the outside damage. And if you look at a lot of these very, very beautiful Russian women out of Siberia, all of them use sea buckthorn on a regular basis.
Yeah, and that's what I said. Anytime I've mentioned it, especially to women, they get it. But I think you're starting to get a flavor here, no pun intended, because I don't think you eat the sea buckthorn. But when we talk about being a food archaeologist, I mean, that's really what you've made a living of, is discovering these unique products around the world, learning the history of them, and help them bringing to the United States. And it's not just Russia. I know you're spending more time in China, but I'm also fascinated. I know you've done a lot of work. I think it started through the Vatican, but in Mexico, and I've heard some of the stories about the avocados. So share with me the avocados. We're going to move forward to one of my favorite stories, and that'll help transition us into the technology side.
You know, the avocado was actually, they know genetically it was born on a slope near a city called Uruapan in Mexico. So when people think of an avocado, you know, they're now grown all over the world, but you naturally want to eat a product where it's genetically from. It does not need any water. It does not need any fertilizer. All the avocados in California needs enormous amount of pumped in water that requires electricity. People don't understand that over 40% of the power in the state of California is used to pump water around the state.
Yeah.
We live in a desert. So why should we be buying avocados from California when they should not naturally be growing here? So also, an avocado is filled with fat. So you hear this word fat. Fat is not a bad thing. It is if it's artificial fat, if it's fat that is made up in a lab. But this complex fat from an avocado is actually very, very good for you. And, there's a lot of avocado toast now being sold all over the place, which has caused the price of avocados to go up. And I've now seen a lot coming from Chile and a lot coming, and unfortunately they're gassed and they're frozen. And that's a whole nother issue and a problem is, yes, you can have a clean avocado, but if it's been gassed, that's not necessarily a good thing for you. And I know you don't realize probably avocados that you're eating have been gassed.
Yeah. And again, just with the avocados, I know you like to go to find the actual source of the food, negotiate directly with the actual landowners or process people if you can. And that's what makes a lot of what you do unique, is that sort of source and story that other people don't have.
Yeah, I think one of the factors where people won't go to the actual Michoacan area is it's basically this U.S. State Department has that region as the same level of going to Iraq or North Korea or Afghanistan. It's dangerous because of the existing drug wars going on there. The La Familia runs that area. But I'm not in the drug business. So why in the world would they want to go after me? They don't know who I am. They don't know that I have anything. So there's no reason for that to happen.
Yeah.
And so I go down there, and beautiful area with volcanoes and history and 100-year-old churches and beautiful haciendas all sprinkled throughout that region.
Yeah, and I'm going to digress on a quick John Sutton tangent story here because this happened more often than not. I brought John in to meet some friends of mine a couple years ago who claimed that I believe the father or grandfather, somebody invented the margarita. However you could invent the margarita, I'm not sure, but they were looking to create something in distribution. And I brought John in for lunch, and this is one of many times that he's done this. They go, oh, well, it's in this little area of Mexico you've probably never been to. And he goes, oh, well, you mean this area with blah, blah, blah. They go, yeah. Oh, yeah, with the little church on the corner. Yeah, with the door around the back where when you go underneath, the father meets you and you duck under. He's been in these places that I don't even understand, and we're not going to go in those stories. So let's go back. You said something interesting, which is the environmental impact of avocados, which to me is an interesting position, which leads to one of my other favorite stories, which is what I call your EcoShock tuna.
Yeah.
Now that I call it the EcoShock because I think it's cool and fascinating, but talk about the tuna in Sri Lanka and what's being done differently, and then we're going to move into how food security, whether it's avocados or fish, starts impacting technology. But I think the Sri Lanka tuna is fascinating.
So Sri Lanka is an island off the southern coast of Italy, and it was geologically separated millions and millions of years ago. So the flora and fauna of that island developed into very unique things that are found nowhere else in the world, such as cinnamon, such as pepper. What the Ayurvedic nature of the island, which is a way of healing, which is a way of taking the different spices and the cloves and the different things, adding it to a spirituality to heal you, is where Buddha actually traveled, was sick, and actually traveled to Sri Lanka to heal. And there is part of a shrine there that holds physically one of his bodily items there to this day. So Sri Lanka has been known for thousands of years as an island of holiness, of healing. And unfortunately, it was in a civil war for close to 50 years, a brutal civil war going on. So all the coastal ships around the country were not allowed to go out. They were just attacked and feared. So really the intercoastal fishing was suspended. So off the coast, literally when the Civil War ended, the fish were dying of old age right off the coast because no one had been catching them. So I tasted this tuna when I was in Sri Lanka, and it was so delicious. And I'm like, why is this? And he took me out on the boat, and we went way out, and he showed me that there.
Well, hold on. Before you talk about how it is, this is what I was interested in. Talk about how tuna is normally caught and the problems with the two methods, which I think will lead to this, and it'll transition us and make more sense.
Yeah, so I was just getting into that. So mostly tuna is caught by nets and long lines of small hooks. And when you catch tuna by nets, what happens is of course dolphins and everything gets caught in the nets, but they're struggling. They're realizing they're dying, and so any natural creature, when it feels it's dying, it releases enzymes, it releases different components in your body to stop the shock of death. And what that does, those chemicals then pollute your muscles, pollute everything within fish and human beings. So
the same thing with the long lines when they're fighting to get in when you're trying to reel them in.
So what this company does ecologically, they have the hooks.
So I call it EcoShock. Here it comes.
And then the hooks are larger, so smaller tuna cannot get its mouth around. But when the large tuna grabs it, a magnet goes down and shocks and kills them before they start struggling to their death. So when you have an immediate death, those chemicals aren't released, and that juicy piece of flesh is naturally preserved.
Yeah.
And there is a difference, and I was selling it to the top restaurants of the world. Charles Phan won the James Beard Award as the best restaurant in the United States and the best chef. I was selling directly to him his tuna.
Yeah.
So I think where's my James Beard Award?
That's what I joke, though, because EcoShock, it sounds bad, but it's actually more humane for the fish. It's better for the environment.
It is.
And it's a better overall, we can't call it an experience, but it is. So let's talk about tuna for a minute, and we're going to move it forward to food security and blockchain. I know you've done a lot in beef, but let's stay in food for a minute. There's some ideas around food security and food trust and things like that, and I know you spend a lot of time in blockchain. You've been with me in all over Malta, Barcelona, Milan, Monaco, Hong Kong. Yeah. So talk about how you've seen some of the technology impacting food security. Primarily, fish is an easy one. I know you're doing work in beef as well, but pick a lane and just kind of share with us what you're seeing.
So here's where blockchain is going to revolutionize this, because governments, if people think that governments are going to solve the environmental problem, you're wrong. There is the sword approach that government is doing, which is legislating all these things, saying banning this and banning that and going after you. I believe in the shield approach, which is to protect us. Government should actually have a shield and protect us from things, not a sword, which is a stabbing mechanism. So what is blockchain doing? Blockchain can basically go to where many things are grown all over the world that are natural to its environment. I will go to another thing, which is destroying the environment, which is vanilla. Vanilla in Madagascar and Tahiti is the #1 cause of the destruction of natural forests. That those symbiotic ecosystems has taken thousands of years to blossom and bloom, that have been wiped out overnight to make way for vanilla. Where vanilla is naturally from a city called Papantla in Mexico. That's where genetically it's from. Vanilla's not from Madagascar, and it's not from Tahiti. But Tahitian vanilla sounds better than Mexican vanilla. I think it is a travesty, and I think it should be banned buying vanilla from Madagascar and Tahiti. It's destroying the environment, and these are things people don't know. Now, in Papantla, which I've hiked up for 5 hours to the top of these peaks, what is vanilla? Vanilla is the stamina from an orchid. So it's basically the thing that grows out of a beautiful orchid flower. It wraps itself naturally up the stalk of palm trees and they harvest the stamina that comes out of that beautiful flower and make vanilla. There's plenty of land in Papantla. There's plenty of opportunity to grow natural vanilla where you don't have to cut down the forest, you don't have to put fertilizer in the ground. So now all the cheats come in because they will say, oh, this is made in Mexico now. Well, what blockchain will do is geotag it. It will also know the distance it's coming from, which is very important too, because a lot of times people lie and can geotag it from a distance, but you don't know how long it's traveled, and that's a big one. That blockchain can sequentiate all of that going on. Also temperature changes, because a lot of things that come from the southern hemisphere and come to the northern hemisphere go through tremendous temperature change. All of that can be recorded on the blockchain, which you can't duplicate and can't steal and can't lie about it. That's the beauty of it. So all these organizations can then see regionally what part of the world these food items, which are in high demand, are better off for the environment. It tastes better, and the cost is great as well.
Yeah, and I talk a lot about that, which you've done a great job of. So the food security is everything from, and I like using the fish example, right? Is the tuna that gets caught in Sri Lanka has a higher value than somewhere else? Is it really there? How long is it stored in these different locations? But I use the other side for corporations. If tuna gets served at Costco and somebody gets sick or dies, everybody in the chain's getting sued. Costco, Unilever, all of the shippers. So there's two sides of the equation, and where I think it gets fascinating is not only the contract side that you've mentioned, but when you marry it with IoT, the Internet of Things, if you've got a device that actually registers the temperature of that truck and registers the distance it's writing to, if you've got an IoT device that says, here's how much water was used, that whole chain of food custody really increases. And theoretically, that should not only provide better security for the people at the table, but then also better value back to the farmers and the actual owners, which is really the field you play in.
Here's a real case example. I've had 40 products in Trader Joe's over the last 8 years. I've traveled with the head buyers of Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Costco, Walmart, all over the world. Case in point, I had containers of dates from Tunisia that were shipped up to Trader Joe's. I had 5 containers ready to go on the water. When the container hit, it was fumigated. So you have the FDA requires you to fumigate dates because they don't want any invasive species, bugs or things to come into the country. It was totally fumigated. When it entered the United States, that container sat there for 2 weeks before it was inspected. Anything could have crawled in that container. It's not a total sealed container at that point because they broke the seal, they looked in, and then it went to secondary inspection. It's in part of the area where there's other containers as well. Yeah. So they saw one pallet with bugs on the one pallet. Trader Joe's rejected not only that container, they rejected all 5. I lost about $600,000 and Trader Joe's could care less. Yeah. That's what it is. Now, if that had blockchain and fumigation sensors as well as bug sensors in there that could register this, I would have been able to see the whole entire thing.
Right, you would have known and been able to get in a lot quicker.
I would have known and blamed the U.S. federal government for their shortcomings, which it was.
Yeah, and that's part of what I talk about is where liability lies in this. Is it's hard to prove liability in some of this aspect around blockchain and smart contracts. And again, it's the example I use with the tuna is if the kid gets sick, the point of failure was the guy with the refrigerator truck who said it was refrigerated for 3 days and it wasn't. And same thing for you. If you're writing this to a contract, you know when something's open, you've got sensors and notification. It's a fascinating thing that I think will come up. How do you believe it'll impact beef? Because I know you were early in the beef chain side and some of the markets that were opening in China.
Yeah, so I will be attending China's largest agricultural trade show here at the end of September. And the situation with beef is this. I was in Wyoming because that is truly, to me, the best state for beef in the United States. Why? It's truly grass-fed, all right?
And water, from what you said.
And when you think about it, everyone's like, oh, what are these cattle eating? Well, have you ever thought about what are they drinking?
Yeah.
What if you as a human being had delicious, steak or the best vegetables from, the Garden of Eden, but yet you were drinking fracking water? How would you feel? Okay? The cattle that are basically in Texas that are held by a company called XL, which is essentially Cargill. They control the largest slaughterhouses in the U.S. They're feeding the cattle corn that they grow that's all GMO because cattle's stomachs cannot handle corn. They were not meant to eat corn. Their stomachs are all cut up, so they're bleeding. They have to be injected with hormones, and they have to also be injected with antibiotics to stop the infections and the bleedings of their stomach. That's the problem. I don't want to eat that.
Yeah.
You don't know where your meat is coming from. You should know. And Wyoming, I've been all over. I participated in the humane branding. They actually have names for these cattle. I've been to the Lockhart Ranch. I've been to Senator Ogden's ranch, how they're free range and they eat grass, and the humaneness of what's going on with no antibiotics, no hormones needs to be consumed if you decide to eat meat.
Okay. And I know as well, we're going to switch gears and wrap up on a few things. You've started helping other companies. So I know the IBM Food Trusts of the world. There's big companies out there trying to figure this space out. You've recently joined an organization you may or may not want to talk about, but companies are starting to come to you looking for help. And what's your area of expertise to really be able to add value to them?
You know what? There's a firm that I just joined as the food and beverage expert. It's a merchant bank called Millennium Financial. And what's happening is that the stock markets are at its highs. All of these companies now, the way of stockbrokers and the way of finance is slowly coming to an end. It's not the way. This cannot go on forever. So merchant banks are being set up to invest into private companies to help grow the cash flow and have that cash flow, the profits from the company, enrich the investors, not just a bloated stock market. So I was brought in to basically look and analyze food and beverage opportunities around the world. And I've been to thousands of factories. I know BS when I see it. I can go into a factory right away and know if they're lying in 30 seconds by looking at so many times they've only cleaned half of the wall. So I can know that I'm coming. I see half of the factory cleaned and I look at the other half and it's dirty. I've seen them basically hire Hollywood extras to go and pretend that they're packaging boxes. I've seen that they've said, oh, we've been working here for years. And I'm like, well, why are all these cobwebs all over what's supposed to be moving parts? So food, look at what's happened with the investments in Beyond Meat. You're talking billions of dollars are being made. The next generation of investments as wealth is in food. The resources of food are dwindling. The population is expanding. Climate change is wiping out what we know as the current way of growing food is coming to an end. That's why I've been brought on. There's no one better in the world that understands this stuff than me.
And with that, I will agree completely, because not only the food side, I'm always fascinated. John has amazing stories. Again, I call him the travel savant. You may see why, as he's amazing at not only figuring his way out around these countries, but has been doing it for a long, long time. So appreciate your coming in today. John is down as well on the Groove Radio podcast station. It's called The Truth in Food. You can find him on iTunes. Again, thank you for joining. This is Steve and me, the Bullseye Guy, your host. The program's produced by Swedish Eagle and the great group down here at Groove Radio in the studios in Los Angeles. For more information about this program, visit the website, thebullseyeguy.com. And again, if you like this episode, please subscribe and like my channel as well as John Sutton with The Truth in Food. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Everybody, tune in next time. Thank you so much.